Hi folks, it's Colleen Belk, one of the authors of your textbook. And today I'm going to try to help you understand the three different kinds of lipids. So lipids are one of the major macromolecules we find in cells. You might recall that the others are proteins and carbohydrates and nucleic acids. And the lipids are interesting in that they can be subdivided into three different kinds. So we'll see that there are fats are one kind, steroids are another kind, and phospholipids are a third kind. So there's three kinds of lipids: the fats, the steroids, and the phospholipids. And these three kinds of lipids are united in that they're either entirely or partially hydrophobic. So hydrophobic, again, is water hating. Sometimes we use the word nonpolar to describe chemicals that are hydrophobic. So these three are united in their hydrophobicity and also in their capacity to store energy. So I'm going to look at the structure and function of each of these. So the structure of a fat is that we have this 3-carbon backbone. So here's the 3-carbon backbone, sometimes called a skeleton, the carbon skeleton. And each of these carbons is bonded to a fatty acid tail. So here's one fatty acid tail, here's another, and here's a third. And if we look a little closer at the structure of the fatty acid tail, we see that it's rich in hydrogens and carbons. So lots of hydrogens and carbons. And another word for this is hydrocarbon, hydrogens and carbons bonded to each other. And if you think of hydrocarbons, you may have heard of fossil fuels like gas, petroleum. These are hydrocarbons. Hydrocarbons are energy rich. This is why we combust gas to give our car energy. So hydrocarbons are energy rich, and they're also hydrophobic, these fatty acid tails. So one of the functions of fats is energy storage. And carbohydrates, we know, store energy, but fats, gram for gram, store even more energy than carbohydrates. And then fat, like body fat, in humans, for example, helps protect our internal organs, and it can protect us from the cold. So structure and function of fats. Steroids structurally are composed of these 4 fused rings, and this particular steroid is cholesterol, which we find in cell membranes. But we have these 4 fused rings, 1, 2, 3, 4. And they, in addition to forming this particular steroid cholesterol, which we find in cell membranes, steroids are also precursors to the synthesis of certain hormones like estrogen and testosterone. So they can function as hormones, sex hormones, and they can also function as cholesterol itself functions as a way to help regulate, it helps regulate membrane fluidity. So it's inserted right into the cell membrane, and it can help regulate how fluid that membrane is. The last kind of lipid that I'm going to talk about are the phospholipids. And again, we can see this 3-carbon skeleton. So very similar to the fat with the 3-carbon skeleton. But with a phospholipid, we only have 2 hydrophobic fatty acid tails. So we get some energy from these hydrocarbon-rich fatty acid tails. And also we have the 3rd carbon is bonded to a phosphate head group. So in the fat, all 3 carbons are bonded to fatty acid tails, but in the phospholipid, we just have the 2 hydrocarbon tails and then a phosphate head group. And different phospholipids would have different phosphate head groups. They'd also have different lengths of tails. Same thing is true for the fats, different lengths of tails, different amounts of double bonds in the tails as well. This is the way we typically draw schematically what a phospholipid looks like. So we have our polar water-loving head group, and in cell membranes, this faces the aqueous solution in the cell, the water and stuff that surrounds the cell. And then we have our fatty acid tails. So structurally, phospholipids have that 3-carbon backbone. Only 2 of the carbons are attached to fatty acid tails, and 1 is attached to the head group. In terms of structure, in terms of function, phospholipids are important constituents of cell membranes, and we'll be talking more about cell membranes as we work our way through the textbook, as the semester goes on. And we can see that we'll see the role of phospholipids in cell membranes. So to review, 3 kinds of lipids: fats, steroids, phospholipids. They're either partially or entirely hydrophobic, and they typically store energy.